Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest in the OnBase podcast series. I'm your host, Paul Gibson, and with everyone talking about GTM and AA right now, I'm really excited that today I'm talking with Hannah Ajikawo, CEO and founder of Revenue Funnel, on the subject of mastering go-to-market fundamentals and the role of AI in sales execution. For those who don't know, Hannah is an award-winning go-to-market consultant, helping B2B scale-ups unlock growth and optimize their revenue engines. And with over 16 years of experience, Hannah's been recognized as a LinkedIn top voice, LinkedIn Sales Insider, Salesforce influencer, and one of the 100 most powerful women in sales by ourselves, Demandbase. Wow, what an accolade. It's great to get you on the podcast, Hannah. It's a big topic we're having to cover, and I'm looking forward to digging in. So thanks for joining us today, and welcome to the show.
No, thank you. You've set me a really hard task to stop talking after 20 or 30 minutes. So yeah, game on.
Excellent. Yeah, we try and keep it succinct, but if it's interesting stuff, we're more than happy to carry on as long as it takes. So let's go for it. And obviously, what we're going to talk about today is an interesting, very relevant topic. But if you don't mind, let's start with a simple question, Hannah. Can you walk us through your journey to where you are today?
Yes, sure. So thank you for the intro. I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm getting to the stage where I need some theme music with all the mini announcements. But yeah, so it's close to 17 years now in every kind of go-to-market role that you can think of. So started out like many did, accidentally falling into sales at a really large B2B tech company. So that was in 2008. Done every role that you can think of. And very early on in my career, it was very much me making decisions that were dictated by the organizations that I worked for. So that was my career trajectory. And then I started to get curious when I was working for more disruptive startups. So I think I worked for my first AI company in 2011, where they were trying to do something amazing. But as we know, it takes a lot of computing power to do some of the things that AI is trying to do today, which was very hard to do all those years ago. So today, as Revenue Funnel, it's a culmination of everything that I've learned and been doing for the last 17 years. And today we're helping B2B tech and services organizations to create and execute go-to-market plans that effectively find pipeline. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and it's excited to dive into some things as we go through this conversation today.
Absolutely. As you say, a great journey and lots of success in there. So really well done. So without further ado, then let's dig in. What early challenges did you face that pushed you to define and I suppose refine the foundational elements of go-to-market strategies?
I think for me, so when I worked at a lot of companies. I'm a recruiter's nightmare. No one will hire me, so I just had to hire myself, right? So what happened is I got into this sort of mid stage of my career as a rep and also as like a player coach, doing different roles, and noticed that there was a lot of organizations that were just underperforming. Like the go-to-market teams were not delivering the results, but nothing was really happening. So this is in complete contrast to different scenarios where you don't perform for 1 month, you're on a pip. After that, it's like goodbye, right? So I was really trying to understand, just by natural curiosity, what is happening in the rest of the business, what's happening with sales and marketing, what's happening with product, how does operations work. So I just became a curious junior sort of salesperson, and that helped me to understand that, oh, okay, there's a wider thing that happens. All the infrastructure around sales actually helps a company to become successful or not. So what I found as I moved throughout my career is actually a lot of people don't really know what strategy is. They don't do strategy. They have this plan that surfaces from a spreadsheet, and then they go out in the field and try and figure it out as they go along. So I found that as I got into consulting, when you start to ask very specific and pointed questions around what the plan is, how you're tracking it, what are you doing, where you focused, people just couldn't really articulate that clearly. So I made it sort of my mission to start to simplify that throughout my learning and the experiences. So just seeing underperforming teams and then lots of leaders who have these big dreams to create these big impacts at companies not succeeding, and in turn reps and teams not succeeding, that made me think, you know what, there's a way that we need to really start to get into the fundamentals and get that right before we do everything sophisticated. So that's really what drove that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I've been in sales for over 100 years now. So it's a constantly changing beast, and every day we're learning something new, right? So I think that's really important as well. So is there a key moment that you can reflect on where getting the GTM fundamentals right actually transformed maybe pipeline generation for you or the teams you were working in?
Yeah. I mean, It's interesting because it's never the sexy stuff. It's always just pretty straightforward things. And I think we are so, because of how technology evolves, we're always thinking about doing all of these amazing things, but we're not getting the basics right. So for me, thinking about just one or two clients. So I'll think about one that's slightly smaller and one that's more in the sort of tens of millions. But one of the simple things that we did was, so this is a B2B tech company doing just over sort of 12 million or so. And the challenge they had is revenue was declining rather than growing. And also they had seen themselves, which we see a lot, right? This recycling the sales team. Every few years you wipe out the team and bring in a new set of reps. And getting in there, the question that I asked is, why do you think this is happening? Without using the reps as an example, what else is happening? And then you start to realize, oh, okay, we missed out on some things. So one of the big things for them was actually two things: repositioning, and then also focusing down where they win the most. So what that did is it removed distractions and the noise and got them to play in an area that they had the most success in. And just doing that on a very specific set of accounts and understanding what some of those signals look like allowed them to develop pipeline and very quickly close that inside the year. And when you have a lifetime value of multiple years and multiple seven figures, that's just one client can change a business. So so that focus is something that really helped to generate pipeline and remove noise and of course give them the results that they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's really interesting actually, because we have conversations day in, day out with Demandbase as our business around how much time, budget, and resource is spent by organizations on companies they can't sell to, and their business doesn't want them to sell to because they're not they're a poor fit and they never get to value. So I think that's a really important thing, and we help make sure they're focused on those ICP accounts that actually mean something to their business and they can keep and add value to over time. So yeah, really important point. So as we think about businesses in general and the listeners on this podcast that they may be working in, why do you think perfecting GTM fundamentals is so essential for improving sales execution and building a strong pipeline?
Yeah, so I talk about or created something called go-to-market building blocks, right? So there's like these 7 pieces of a puzzle that, when put together in a particular order, help to us to create this. So the first thing is, let's just get a grounding in what we're thinking about when we talk about fundamentals. So at the most basic area, we're talking about where do we play and how do we win, right? So in this grand, massive pool of stuff that we could do, and the energy and resources that we had, to your point, where can we put that where we're going to try and get the best result? That's one of the first things we have to think through. And it's a very simple question, but it's a very hard thing to try and answer, right? The next thing is, okay, so now that we understand that, how do we win? So this is what makes you unique enough in that scenario to win more often than not. From here, we start to understand, what does the market look like and how do they make those decisions? How do we then formulate a process to support them with that decision making? How do we then get the right kind of methodologies and tactics and tasks and campaigns and activities to help drive that process? How do we get the right people, partners, and internal teams to do that? And then how do we wrap tech around that to make that all more efficient and create more scalability? But what we do is we say, there's new tech, let's get tech, and then let's go figure out the rest, right? Even if we're an established organization. So perfecting those two things means, if we have a cup of liquid and that's 100% of energy, and we have 10 cups, how that transfer of energy across 10 cups is going to be pretty weak. We're just always going to have this massive gap, right, in all of those areas. However, if we transfer that to maybe 1 or 2 cups, now we've transferred a lot of our resources, and we're optimizing that energy to do these 2 very specific things. So when we actually do that right, it allows us to become better at that one particular thing or those 2 particular things, and therefore develop the right brand, develop the right awareness, familiarity, trust, and all of those things that allow us to find and build more pipeline. And I don't think we do that very well because we don't give ourselves the time to get that right.
Yeah, great points. And I think that the old tech strategy argument is an ongoing one, right?
Well, yeah.
You can't do one without the other. And I think that's the important thing. Buying tech without strategy is no more effective than having strategy without tech. So I think you hit on a good point there. Now, everyone's talking AI right now. Some are over-egging it for sure, but some are underplaying it as well. It's like it, I think it's fair to say, like it or not, it's here for the long term, and in many ways, it will shape the future of sales as we know it. So, in your opinion, how is AI reshaping traditional GTM strategies and influencing every stage, I suppose, of the sales process?
Yeah, it's funny because I spoke about this at HubSpot's Inbound, and we were just talking about that last year. So there's a couple of areas. One is that leaders right now and organizations are being given directives from their boards or the people that matter, right, the key stakeholders, to go think AI first. So everything that they did in this go-to-market plan that they had, they're now like, okay, let's put an AI lens over it. How does that now impact everything we do that we already planned for? But also, what new possibilities does it open up for us as an organization in what can be achieved using this new technology, or more democratized technology rather than new? And then what happens is it then gets into the day-to-day, and we have two sides of the coin. We have the buyer, who's now thinking, well, with AI, you should know more about me. You should be able to serve me better. And with the sales process side, it's like, well, I should be able to step back a little bit, and AI and this thing should be able to drive more of my process or help me more in the process. So it's influencing how we think, it's influencing the possibilities, it's influencing the scope of ideas. But day to day, it's influencing things about what's expected from buyers, but also how sales reps think about conducting themselves in their role. So it's just so broad and explosive. And the challenge is, how do we contain it and make the best use of it?
Yeah, I think that's right. And we hear lots of people who are utilizing AI for, driving salespeople and SDRs to go off and do particular tasks. And some of them are losing a bit of confidence because there's never the why behind it. Go and do that because they say go and do it, and then they do it and it's wrong, and then they lose confidence. So I think it's really important that everyone's got to harness AI, right? But it's got to have some structure behind it so you can actually understand why AI is saying that. And a lot of people say that AI replaces salespeople per se. I don't think that's the case, but I think salespeople harnessing the power of AI will no doubt replace salespeople who aren't. So I think it's important that we all adopt it. So when you look at the market today, Hannah, what areas of GTM do you feel are most primed to benefit from AI integration right now?
So I look at I talk about the go-to-market building blocks, but I look at go-to-market differently to a lot of people, because when we think about go-to-market, we're firstly, we're really anchored in SaaS, right? And in the kind of SaaS industry. And when we get out of that, we're like, oh, okay, it's actually, there's a lot of other sales industries that exist, right? People that are going up and down farms, right? Selling their produce. So if we just think broadly, I always think about the B2B buyer journey, right? So it's semi-linear. You can fight me, but essentially the psychological way that people think about making decisions is really quite, it hasn't really changed in, I don't know, 1,000 years, right? We become aware of something, and then we think about the decisions. You'll know from Demandbase really supporting that. Now, I say that because when we're thinking about the areas of go-to-market, revenue funnel as a business, we have like a 12-spoke model that we think through. There's different parts of like go-to-market specifically, but we tie that to the actual B2B buyer journey. So the question that I want to answer is, which areas of the B2B buyer journey are most primed to benefit from AI integration? So we flip that on its head, and we think about the early stages of when a buyer is in that stage of awareness, really trying to figure out, what's happening. I'm enlightened to a new issue, challenge, or opportunity. And does it connect to anything that's important to me right now? Or should I care about it? And then the other part is really, now that I know about it and I'm starting to connect the dots to my own environment and my context, what are the options available to me? And I feel like AI in general is primed to support those two areas. One, the hands-off approach to helping companies and businesses through that awareness stage of understanding and learning and education. And also at the point at which they connect the dots with a sales team or go-to-market team, it's really about how we can help to record all of those interactions, track that data, and be able to leverage it in a way that isn't us spending the time doing the research, trying to listen to every single thing they say on the call, but allowing us to interpret it in a slightly unbiased way, right? So the fact that we can go in and ask our call recorder, did Paul say that he cared about this thing? No, I can't find an instance where Paul said he cared about that. That's something that I couldn't remember when my son's running the room to try and knock, Hannah, mummy, I need a drink. And then I'm like, sorry, prospect. so we're really being helped in that way. And I think if we think about the B2B buyer journey, we're then able to think about how we start to apply different parts of go-to-market, like talent, hiring, marketing and advertising, positioning, pricing, all of these things to those elements, right? So add pricing. Pricing and strategy is a big part of go-to-market, right? How do we help that at the awareness stage? Okay, so what we do is we might have dynamic pricing based on the insights that we know about a prospect as they land on the page. We know that they're a big company, they're enterprise. We're going to dynamically price it at this state. We're not even going to show like the entry level is pointless. How about we just show the enterprise pricing on the page based on what we know? So there's all these things that we can do, but we're thinking about it in the wrong way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's some great points you made in there. And I think it's interesting seeing all the talk around AI agents, which is everyone's buzzword at the moment. And our own platform utilized it. So you can actually go in and type in your question like you would in chat GPT. There's fantastic platforms out there with huge amounts of relevant data, but finding it is so difficult. So I think there's so many examples where AI is going to be game changing and allow sales and marketing and other people to do what they really want to do, which is selling and marketing, not all the admin stuff. So yeah, I think it's really important stuff. So when you look at, I suppose, the present situation in the market out there, what actionable advice would you give to teams who are looking to strengthen their GTM foundation for better pipeline outcomes?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the biggest things is always going to be about focus. I speak a bit about this already, right? So again, more frameworks, but essentially, if we really sit as an organization and we remove our ego and we remove our dreams and we look at the data, but also look at the different things that are impacting the market and our core market, we'll figure out where we win. If you figure out where you win the most and you optimize your business to go focus on that area, it's really is game changing. Like it's not an easy job to do, but how do we win? What's unique about us? What access do we have that people don't have? What product specifics do we have that people don't have? What allows us to be faster than competitors? What do we know that no one can beat us at? And we don't often sit down and just really think through that. And it might just be your people. The talent that you have is the differentiator. So how do you then help to elevate those things to get into that focus so you can win more often than not? So I really think that that's one of the most important things that we can do, and then align our business to do everything for that buyer. That's it. That's the cheat code. But again, it takes time, and we don't give ourselves the time to think through that often.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that I've got a really good sales team, probably the best I've ever had, actually, which is a nice thing to say. Oh. The main reason I say that is because they take the time to understand a buyer. And we're not talking about Demandbase. We're talking about them as a business and their issues and how can we solve them. And as you say, that's it. We need to be thinking the buyer, not our own technology or our own processes. So I think that's a really good one. And following on from the last question, then, how can organizations seamlessly incorporate AI into their GTM framework to get the best results?
I think what we want to do is really look at what is the task we do. So we hear a lot about things like jobs to be done, right? So there's jobs to be done across the entire go-to-market function. And a lot of those are interlinked across sales, marketing, CS, and even support sometimes, and ideally products. But we're just thinking specifically at those customer-facing teams. There's a lot of things that we do. So the first thing we want to do is identify what are those tasks, and let's be really explicit and direct and quite objective about it. And then we want to think, what are the things that take up the time? What are the things that we actually still need to do because we need a human eye? And what's the things that's like, to be fair, if I really did have an assistant to do this, I probably would have paid them to do it. So it's that last bit where we say, actually, let's now think about what the core use cases are. And from there, you want to start thinking about what native functionality do we already have in the technology that exists with us. So almost every single company integrated generative AI into their platforms in the last 18 months. Go use them. A lot of it's free. They want you to use it. They're depending on you to use it. And then we want to go into the next level of sophistication around, do we build or buy when it comes to looking at more sophistication around AI? So maybe we're looking at agentic AI and what some of that reasoning power can add to our go-to-market. But again, tie it to the things you're doing. Don't get too creative about what's all the possibilities. Just start with what you're doing, because it's very easy for me to then go as a leader to my senior leader and say, hey, I need 100K or 50K or 10K, whatever it is, to go do this thing. so we don't have to go and hire 5 people, or so we can get them to focus on that enterprise scaling thing that we want to do next quarter. But it really is tied to things you do, because when that familiarity makes it really easy for a senior leader to be like, well, I get it because I know what that is. I know what that takes. Whereas if you give them an idea that they've never heard of before, it's actually quite hard for them to attach that to the reality. So start with what you're doing and just make that better.
Yeah, really good insight and advice there. And you mentioned leaders. So to do all of this stuff, you need buy-in and support from those at the top. So what do you think leaders can take to ensure their teams are ready for AI's impact on sales execution and obviously beyond?
Yeah, you've got so I always think if I was an operator inside an organization and not just coming in as an impartial consultant that just kind of goes in and does all this stuff and walks away, I would be trying to do 2 things. One of 2 things. One is I would have something scheduled in my diary which I do now, to proactively go and learn about the core things that are available when it comes to AI and what the use cases are. So I always talk about right now we're at a stage where the way that we exist and see the world is through our own paradigm, right? All these patterns and things and experiences that form how we see things. And there's a lot of, and that's effectively like our operating system. That's the thing that allows us to function and do stuff. But what happens is there's a lot of leaders that are still running on an operating system from 2021 or 2022. And I always think, like, if you think about if you had not updated your Apple device from 2021, how much risk would you be exposed to, right? Inside your operating system, like things will start to break down, things won't work, the apps that you used to use don't work. That's essentially what happens when, as leaders, we don't proactively figure out how we upgrade our operating system, which means we have to continue to learn. And if we're not going to proactively do it, we need to have access to a team or tools or people who can help just feed us that new knowledge. Like, what's the thing? What's the AI digest for this week? What do I need to know? Otherwise, all the other things around that go-to-market I was talking about, the model, right? So the hiring, we're going to fall out of what good looks like with how we attract talent, the metrics, the KPIs that people are using to run their go-to-market organizations. We're going to fall out of sync with that. We have to continue to figure it out. So either proactively go and learn so you can understand what the impact's going to be on your team, or go find a source that gives you that digest as frequently as possible.
Yeah, it's great points. And it goes way beyond just saying there's AI, go have some fun. You've got to understand it and really understand the business reasoning behind it as well. So
Absolutely, yeah.
we've dug into AI a lot already, so this is a question we always ask, but it may be you've covered a lot of it. But how do you feel AI is going to change account-based go-to-market approaches going forward?
The big thing for me is I think it's going to improve the accuracy, right? So one thing that we always hear when it comes to intent, signals, things like this, and focusing on accounts is, where's the information coming from? Is it really showing that someone's in market or they're not in market? Do we have enough information to allow us to actually make the right decisions? And I think what AI is going to do, specifically agentic AI, is give us more reasoning so that we are getting out of our biases where we're like, Google's a great account. And it's like, actually, this real small startup is showing a lot of promise, because guess what? The market's trending. I'm pulling in like investor data to tell us that this is actually a growing market. I'm looking at how much in, what the hiring's looking like on all of these global platforms. So we're getting this power, right, to reason better on where we focus our attention as an organization, which I said is a core fundamental for go-to-market. So we get this ability to really completely change how we think about where we focus our attention. And I think that's something that is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's always been bucket loads of data around there and no way of actually making use of most of it. And I think AI is going to actually highlight those bits that are really relevant. So yeah, really good points. This has been great, Hannah. And I know we've only really scratched the surface. So I'm sure there's plenty of insight, and we can make a follow-up podcast without a doubt. And maybe we can look into that. But in the meantime, what tools, technologies would you recommend our listeners should explore?
Oh, there's a lot going on right now. I've just had someone in my inbox about 40 minutes ago show me something else. I'm like, this is great. So I say, I actually wrote a note here. I say break it down into these areas, right? So firstly, thinking about what's going to help us to prioritize, what's going to help us with research, what's going to help us with engagement and being organized as reps and as teams, what's going to help us capture information and capture data, because that's key, and organize it, what's going to help us to follow up, what's going to help us guide and coach throughout the deal engagement. And that's kind of like some big categories. And when we think through that, then we can start thinking about, okay, with prioritization, we're looking at platforms like Demandbase. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. And also additional business databases. So I had an unfair advantage during the early stages of my career because I sold business information. That's how I came up in sales. So I always thought business information first, insight first, intent first, signal first, right? And a lot of people, this brand new groundbreaking concept. I'm like, I've been doing that for 17 years. The other thing is around, so we want to think about tools like that. When it comes to engagement and organizing, there's some incredible tools, right? Sales Nav is like ground zero for what you should be looking at, but also companies like Twain.ai. So these are companies that are helping us to figure out our messaging and positioning based on our focus areas. So again, if we don't know what we're focused on, these tools are not going to give us the leverage that is required for us to be successful. You've got things like AI SDRs really helping for inbound, managing inbound leads. When we come to things like capture, I personally use Sybil.ai to help to monitor my calls and allow me to really have a conversation with it like a colleague. So no longer do I need my manager, right? Or need to sit with my rep to be like, how do you think the call went? Just ask Sybil, how did the call go? Were they interested? And then you've got things like, as we know, ChatGPT and a lot of the main other platforms. But one tool that I was really excited about was simpletalk.ai. Again, like everyone's like, oh, we don't want to be cold called by AI. I don't think anybody sits there saying, oh my God, I can't wait to receive a robot call. But one thing I do say is I have a need right this minute, like me yesterday on a line with British Gas, and I need to solve something. And if it was a robot that was going to call me, I don't care. I don't care what it is. I just want to solve for the need that I have right now. So Simple Talk, the AI is a tool that I came across in the last few weeks that really has those have like strong conversational skills. And it does say, yeah, I'm a bot. I'm AI, and I'm here to answer any questions. My job is to do this, this, and this. And it's like, damn. That's what it takes. So yeah, exciting times, super exciting times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the longer these tools are around, the more human they appear.
Yeah.
You're right. As long as they're answering the questions, that's what really matters. So you're very active on social media, lots of talking events and podcasts, etc. Is there a book, blogs, or any newsletters or other podcasts you'd recommend our listeners should listen out for?
Oh gosh, I'm as I said, like we have to update our operating system, right? So I do all of that. So one thing is I'm really bad with books, which is quite funny. So I never remember the titles, and I just remember the context, right? But when it comes to podcasts, one thing I'll say is if you listen to like the Founders podcast, I personally listen to that because it's everything from sales through to strategy through to like what makes companies successful. So I absolutely love that. I follow quite a lot of, I follow anyone that's talking about artificial intelligence through Substack as like a newsletter platform. I don't really specifically look at any blogs, but I think I subscribe to Bill Gates' blog, which is just his random thoughts that he comes out with, right? And I like it because it's not just always focused on business. So it broadens my horizon around things. And I'd say what the most recent thing, I was thinking if anything else stands out recently that I've listened to. Still a big fan of Diary of a CEO. So Stephen Bartlett, again, you find out the stories of people who have built incredible businesses, but again, like just broader ideas around what is happening in the world. So big fan of Daniel Priestley. Read every single thing that he writes and join every single thing that he's hosting because he shares a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's what comes to for me.
Yeah, some great recommendations there. Thank you. And you've obviously been a great guest yourself, but cheekily, could you share the names of 2 or 3 inspirational people in the B2B space that you recommend we should also bring on the show?
Yeah, so I'd say Jen Allen. I'm pretty sure she's one of the 100 most powerful women as well that you recognize. So Jen is incredible. 17 years at Challenger, and then went out on her own and is doing some amazing things through Demand Gen. I'd also say Lisa Kelly, who I recently had on my podcast. Loved her perspective on sales and how we are just based on who we inherently are. We develop tools that allow us to approach things and see the world in different ways, which then makes us more successful when it comes to sort of go to market. And also Barry Flaherty, who I always get his surname wrong, but effectively he's like the number one connector in the B2B space, right? So when you connect with Barry, all of a sudden you've opened up all of these different synapses and you've got like 200 other people that you can connect with. So I'd say definitely connect with them. I would share their LinkedIns as well.
Awesome, that's great. And on the subject of LinkedIn, I'm sure you've created lots of interest among the listeners. So how would you best like people to get in touch with you after this when they hear this podcast?
I'd say definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Press connect rather than follow. I've still got quite a few thousand connections that you can use up, so I'm more than happy to do that. Please just quote the podcast. I do get some really random requests, and I'm like, I can't connect the dots. So please do quote the podcast, which means make sure you're following and subscribing to it as well. And yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, and there's lots of resources, and I've been posting solidly for almost 5 years, so there's a ton of stuff on there that you can grab and implement immediately in your teams.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend that. I've seen quite a bit of your stuff, and it's always really good and informative.
Thank you.
As this session. So thank you very much, Hannah. I really enjoyed this one, and maybe we'll get another one going. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget there's over 500 others in the series, so make sure you check them out. In the meantime, thanks very much for listening. Look forward to the next one. And until the next time, cheerio.